The Ripjaws KM570 mechanical keyboard from G.Skill features Cherry MX speed silver switches, RGB per key lighting, and on-the-fly macro recording for a premium gaming experience. Meanwhile, the MX780 sports 8 programmable buttons, 3-zone custom RGB lighting, and an ambidextrous design with height adjustment. Click the link in the description to learn more.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today is the long-awaited part 2 of the Enthoo Elite build, our $10,000-ish system that we're going to be building from the ground up. There have been some changes since part 1. Many things have transpired, so before we dive into the actual build section, because we're actually going to be installing things in the case today, I want to quickly go over what has changed since part 1. For starters, a lot of you guys were telling me to delid that Core i9-7980XE or you would do terrible things to me. So, held against my will, I decided to turn this in to the folks over at GamersNexus. GamersNexus Steve actually did a fantastic job delidding this guy and applying some liquid metal himself in order to lower our thermals and increase power efficiency and other good things like that. So I can't wait to actually get this thing installed and take it for a spin, especially with this ridiculous custom loop that we're building around it. It should be pretty exciting. But during his testing, and you guys should definitely go ahead and check out his video, I'll put a link in the description below, that he did with the Rampage 6 Extreme motherboard and this particular CPU, he found that that motherboard was actually throttling the core frequency due to an overheating VRM. So, because of that, and Steve's infinite wisdom, I've decided to invest in an Asus ROG Rampage 6 Extreme monoblock that will hopefully lower the temperatures on our VRM enough so we don't encounter any thermal throttling, because the last thing we want is for this thing to be super nice and delidded and all that and get ruined at the end of the day by the motherboard. So, additionally, I have since done away with the single reservoir and loop idea. We're actually going to be doing 2 loops. So I've actually got some new hardware here, the EK X-Res 140 Revo D5 RGB PWM pump res combos. We've got 2 of them. One loop is probably going to be for our CPU and the other for our graphics cards. Additionally, about that, I currently have one of them installed. We're still waiting on the other GTX 1080 Ti from Asus. We ran into some ridiculous shipping mishaps recently, so it's actually on its way. Long story short, it will be here shortly and we'll be able to continue just fine, but everything's in order for that. I'm very excited to be doing a dual loop system though for the first time. Additionally, you might notice this stack of LL series RGB fans from Corsair. We have 6 120s and 6 140s with their included Commander Pro digital fan and RGB lighting controllers. Those will be situated on our 4 radiators here. And going with the dual loop configuration, we are going to have 2 radiators per loop. So we're going to have a 480 and a 360 for each of our loops, which is pretty insane, covered by these fantastic fans, no pun intended. We've also got some new storage situation here. So we've got 2 M.2 SSDs, these are both NVMe. We've got the 960 EVO, these are both from Samsung. This is a 250 gig version or model that we're going to be using as a boot drive, and then we've got a 2 terabyte stick. That's just going to be for our scratch disk and bigger applications, all of our raw footage and things like that if we're going to be editing games and so forth. I may invest in a second 2 terabyte drive. I think we have enough lanes for that to happen, so maybe we'll do some RAID action. That'd be pretty sweet. This is an overkill system after all. And then finally, we've got the Platimax DF series power supply from Edermax that I showed off in part 1, but this is just a quick verbal update that we do have some custom sleeved cables from Joey at Nsourced on the way. They are in the mail. He's already done with them. I'm not going to give too much away as far as the pattern and colors that we're using. I mean, you can probably figure out that it's going to be more or less color neutral, but they are going to be some really sweet cables, so I can't wait to show those off as well. But I want to start trying to bend some tubes by the end of this part 1 or part 2 video. So we got to get everything installed. Radiators, the fans. Let's go ahead and do that now and see how far we get. Oh boy, it's going to be intense. right, guys, check out the progress we've made. Looks pretty sweet. Things are going pretty smoothly. You can see that we have very little clearance between this rightmost pump res and the radiator. Look, the fitting's just like maybe a millimeter away from the fin stack, just by a hair. And actually, the back plate here, this little modular plate that we mounted these pump reses to, I thought it supported 2 side-by-side reservoirs, but apparently it only has the mounting strips for one of them. So I actually only have one side of this reservoir mounted to that bracket. You can see here, if we take a look at the back side, I actually had to zip tie one side to part of the bracket. So it's kind of ghetto rigged here. And you can't even tell from the other side. It looks perfectly fine. It might be slightly tilted, but I can always tweak that a little bit later. But apart from that, everything's going pretty smoothly here. The fans and radiators are fitting just fine. Had just enough clearance between this radiator fan and the pump res there. But yeah, looking good. Now, after I set all this up, I spent a good hour and a half just looking at this system, trying to figure out where my runs would go, because obviously we're dealing with 2 loops now, and it kind of makes things a little bit more complicated, but I think I figured it out for the most part. So I'm going to share with you guys my idea for each of these runs, and then we're going to get to tube bending. So for this pump res, I was thinking this would control the CPU loop. This would be our CPU loop, right? So, and don't pay attention to the fittings. They're just here for placeholders. They don't necessarily indicate the direction that the tubes will be going. So this is the outlet here. I was thinking I was going to go out just slightly over, and then up, and then go straight across into the monoblock, out of the monoblock, and then we're going to go diagonally back into the corner of the case before going straight up into this inlet for the radiator. We're going to come down here, all the way down. It's going to go back, and then into that back port. Then from here, it's going to go up, just ever so slightly, just barely above the fans. It's going to go all the way to the end of the fans, straight back, and then straight back up to the inlet. So that would be our CPU loop. Now our GPU loop's going to be a little tricky because it's going to have to avoid all of the runs from our CPU loop. It's going to get kind of messy in this area here, but hear me out. We're going to go out, then we're going to go all the way back, and maybe I'll do some like whoop, like a little bit of bendy magic, going straight into this inlet here, and then it's going to go to both of our GPUs, and it's going to come out this guy, another boop, it's going to come out, back here, down below, maybe back into this inlet, out here, into there, and then finally returning from the bottom of the radiator into our pump res. So that is the tentative plan for now as far as the runs go. And I'm going to try to be flexible. If something's not working out, then I'm totally willing to switch it up. And it's all about problem solving at this point. But on that note, I think we are ready to start bending some tubes. However, since I am pretty much as noob as they come when it comes to custom water cooling and tube bending, I'm actually going to call upon my good friend Brian Stroh from BPS Customs. You guys should go check his channel out if you haven't yet. Tons of good stuff there. Reviews, builds, lots of custom work. He does a great job over there. But Brian's going to help me out a little bit. He's going to give me a couple pointers that he's learned over his several years of being a custom water cooling enthusiast, so that maybe I have a little bit of an easier time figuring this all out as I go about the Enthu Elite build. And maybe you guys will learn something too. All the while, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into tube bending so you guys have some nice visuals to overlap on his sexy ass voice. Without further ado, guys, let's get bending.
What's going on, guys? My name is Brian. I run the BPS Customs YouTube channel. I'm sure Kyle will drop a link down there somewhere, and if he doesn't, he's a jerk. But I am here with my very wobbly table to give you guys some tips and also some tricks as far as how to approach your next water cooling project. Now, keep in mind that some of these might seem like fairly basic techniques. However, when it comes to something like water cooling, especially if you're doing an overkill system like Kyle is right now, if you don't have the basics down, you're going to run into problems. You're not only going to waste materials, but you could end up with a flooded box of electronics, and that's not good for anybody. First thing you need before you even start is the right tools. Now you're going to need a heat gun, preferably one that stands up on its own so you don't have to hold it while you're doing your tubes. Second thing, something to cut the tube with. The last thing you definitely need if you're dealing with hardline is one of these little silly silicone inserts, because without this, your tube will collapse when you try to bend it. Now, another thing that I highly recommend having on hand is something to finish the ends of your tubing with. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you cut PETG or acrylic, you'll end up with a not perfectly smooth edge, or even worse, you could have a burr. If you insert that edge into a fitting, you could slice through the rubber O-ring and cause a leak. A lot of times when people have leaks inside their system, it's not necessarily because that fitting was bad from the factory, rather they damaged it during installation. There's a couple different ways you can prevent this from happening. You could buy this from Home Depot. This is called a deburrer. It's about $3. You could do both the inside